Welcome to From Delco to Harrisburg with Representative O'Mara. I'm your host, Morgan Dougherty. Jenn O'Mara represents the 165th Legislative District in Pennsylvania. Today, we will discuss some of what she's been working on recently, including the Pennsylvania state budget, her work with local veterans, and the Pennsylvania Mental Health Caucus. Thank you so much for being here today, Jenn.
Of course. Thanks for having me. It's good to see you.
Good to see you too. So I want to jump right in with talking about the Pennsylvania budget that you've been working on recently as a member of the General Assembly. It is a $40.8 billion budget, and I know Governor Wolf has talked about allocating a good portion of those funds to public education. So what can you tell us about that?
So the budget passed on time this year. That's the first thing I like to mention. It is constitutionally due on June 30th, and it must be a balanced budget, which means we cannot end in debt. We were very fortunate this year. We had an excess funds, basically. We had excess funds. Because of the American Rescue Plan, we had $7 billion from the federal government that we have to allocate by 2024, I believe. And we also had $3 billion in extra revenue. So there were a lot of ideas. It's almost like a good and bad thing to have extra money. There were a lot of opinions about how it should be spent, a lot of different ideas and thoughts about what we should be investing in. Now, the budget, I will say, I voted yes on the budget, and I do think we had a lot of wins in the budget for Delaware County, but it wasn't perfect, and I wish we would have done more. And I just preface with that. The things that I thought were good in the budget, we made some investments in infrastructure, not enough, but some. We also made some investments in veterans' senior homes, which we can talk about in a little bit. We also had a historic increase in public education funding. So we put an extra $300 million into Pennsylvania public schools. And $100 million of that was put through a new formula called the Level Up funding. And basically what that means is $100 million was split between the 100 most struggling schools in the state. So in Delco, there were a number of schools that saw an increase because of that. But frankly, because of that increase, all of schools in Delaware County at least got some increase in funding, which was great for my district. The 3 schools in my district got an extra $13 million split between the 3 of them, which is Radnor, Springfield, and Marple Newtown. The other big thing that I think is good in the budget is we are opening the Delaware County Health Department in January, which is a much needed change for policy in Delaware County. We are the largest county in the country with no health department at this size. And so we had an ask in the budget for $1.7 million, and we were funded with $1.4 million. And that's only for 6 months, from January when we open until June when the fiscal year ends. Moving forward, we should be getting more funding for each year that we have the health department. So that is what I thought was good in the budget. We did also put $2 billion into the rainy day fund, which will be there in case of emergencies as we move forward. And we still have about $5 billion to allocate from the remaining money we had this year. And so that's what I was really disappointed in. I sort of think it's raining right now in a lot of ways, and that we have people struggling because of the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. Our budget didn't include any relief for small businesses. It didn't include enough relief for homeowners, for property taxes. And so I think there were some missed opportunities with this budget. But ultimately, I recognize that the budget is a process where both sides have to compromise. And while this wasn't the compromise that I wanted, it was a really good compromise, and it moved us forward in a lot of ways. And so that's why I ended up voting the way that I did.
Now, as a member of the General Assembly, do you have an opportunity to present your ideas of where those funds could be allocated to?
So yes and no. I don't serve on the Appropriations Committee, and most of the budget decisions are made in Appropriations. In February and every year, there are hearings, appropriations hearings, where the committee members they have presentations from every state agency. This year, it wasn't actually every state agency, but it was select state agencies. But they present their plan, and the state agencies tell us what their needs are, what they will be spending money on, and why. Because I'm not on that committee, I don't get to participate in those hearings and ask questions and share my ideas. But I know the members on the committee, and I can talk to them and share my thoughts with them. And the chair of the Appropriations Committee, the minority chair, does take time to meet with members and ask. The other way that we can sort of set our opinion and make sure it's known is we can send letters to the governor, which I did as a member of the Southeast Delegation chair. I'm actually the chair of the Southeast Delegation. We sent a number of letters to the governor with our explicit request. But really, at the end of the day, the budget's negotiated between the governor and the leaders of the two caucuses in the Senate and the House. And so that's why I think it's important that I send letters to the governor so he knows how I feel and how members of my delegation feel. And we also are in constant contact with the minority leader and the chair of Appropriations and the whip. But I would have more of a say if I got on that committee. A lot of members want to be on the Appropriations Committee, and we only get a certain number of committee assignments. So as you get more seniority, you get put on committees that you want. So who knows, maybe in the future I will. But I did make sure to participate as much as possible. And then at the end of the day, we all vote on the budget. So that's our final way of expressing our approval or disapproval with the process. So.
Okay. And you mentioned a large amount of money was put into that rainy day fund. Can you tell us what the rainy day fund is and some examples of what it's been used for in the past?
Yeah, so the rainy day fund is supposed to be there if there is a financial emergency. So in 2008, when we had our last real recession, that, prior to my time in the assembly, I know we had one with COVID, but in 2008, they used that rainy day fund to balance the budget. So if there's a time where general fund revenues are not where they're supposed to be, where tax revenues are not where they're supposed to be, the rainy day fund is supposed to be there to balance out, basically. And because of what happened in 2008 and then a failure, as some would say in general assemblies in the past, to make investments into the rainy day fund, we really haven't had enough money in there. The idea is that the rainy day fund could fund our state for whatever amount of time it takes to recover from an economic recession. So making that investment, while I know there are some people who didn't agree, and even I didn't to some extent, it does make sense if you're thinking in a fiscally conservative way and you want to make sure that you're prepared for what awaits us. And while we have seen historic revenues based on COVID-19 from last year to this year with taxes and other revenues, who knows how long that will be sustained, and we don't know what awaits us as we continue to recover from the pandemic. So that was the school of thought in thinking, let's put money there. And, I ultimately voted yes, so I helped make sure that happened. But we'll see. I think as we move forward, it will sort of change what is used with the rainy day fund based on what our needs are at the time. Some states have large rainy day funds, some have none. There was a time where our rainy day fund could only fund the state for 4 days. So this changes that. We now have a lot more. But as you said, it's a $40 billion budget. So investing $2 billion is still a drop in the bucket if you're thinking about how long within a year you can fund the state in case of an emergency.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, apart from the budget and being a part of the General Assembly, you did mention your interest in Veterans Affairs. So tell me why this is an important issue to you, and tell me about your work with the Veterans and Emergency Preparedness Committee.
Sure. So I come from a long line of family members serving in the military. My dad was a Marine, my grandfather served in Vietnam, and his parents and uncles before that in World War II, and we can actually trace my family's military lineage back to the Civil War. But my husband really opened my eyes to the needs that veterans face in both the state and the federal government. My husband served 2 tours of duty in Afghanistan as a combat veteran and has 2 Purple Hearts, an Army Commendation for Valor, and suffered multiple injuries in the line of duty. And so when he and I met, he wasn't really utilizing any of his benefits at the VA, despite the injuries and health issues he was dealing with. So I advocated for him through the Veterans Disability Pension process, which is something that is done with the federal government. But we had to jump over so many hurdles to get his pension. And in the process, I met other veterans who were struggling and didn't understand how to do the paperwork or didn't know who to call for help, or were stuck in the process. And so I quickly realized that there weren't enough resources out there to help veterans. So when I got elected, the Veterans and Emergency Preparedness Committee was my top choice. And I was sort of chided for that by other members because there's other committees that may be more appealing for different reasons, but I knew this is where I could make the most impact. And the Veterans and Emergency Preparedness Committee focuses on veterans, but it also focuses on first responders, police, fire, EMS, and also PEMA, and how we respond to emergencies in the state. And my dad was a firefighter who died from gun suicide. We've talked about that before on the show. And many first responders suffer from PTSD and mental health issues. So I knew that that was a place where I could advocate for the issues that I knew about and that I was passionate about. So I'm on that committee. I'm proud to say that we are a very active committee. We're also a very bipartisan committee, probably the most bipartisan of all the committees I serve on, because we recognize that these aren't Democratic or Republican issues. These are issues that are facing our communities and the people that step up to help us. So we focus on veterans issues with the Pennsylvania Department of Military and Veterans Affairs, the DMVA. We also work very closely with firefighter agencies across the state, with police organizations across the state to implement changes that they need to meet their requests for resources. And over the last year, we've been really involved with PEMA, the Pennsylvania Emergency the acronym's escaping me because there's so many, but PEMA is the one that handled our COVID-19 response, and the National Guard. And this committee covers that. So we were very active in making sure that the National Guard and PEMA had enough resources to respond with PPE, with helping nursing homes, with helping first responder agencies, and even with things like flood responses and now tornado responses, as we're seeing the weather increase and become more more dramatic in the damage that it's putting on our communities. So we're really involved in making sure that we have those resources and we can meet the needs of our community.
Absolutely. So can you tell us about some of the specific things that you've done within the Veterans and Emergency Preparedness Committee? I know you mentioned the nursing home for veterans.
Yeah, so last year during COVID-19, tragically, we found out that veterans that are senior citizens that are in these homes were not being cared for properly. So we've been a part of hearings where we're investigating what happened, finding out what changes need to be implemented. We did put extra funding into that line item in the budget to make sure that they have resources, that they have enough PPE. I mean, veterans were dying in these homes because their staff didn't have enough resources, they didn't have enough staff. It was really harrowing and really sad, but we're trying our best now to respond and make sure nothing like that ever happens again. I also have had 2 pieces of legislation that I have authored get signed into law that came from my work on the Veterans and Emergency Preparedness Committee. So when I first got elected back in 2019, I went on a tour of Fort Indiantown Gap, which is where our National Guard is based, and it's north of Harrisburg. And one of the generals was giving a presentation, and he talked about things that they are funded to help with at the DMVA, like the senior homes, and providing some benefits. They help with county veterans offices and VSOs and things, veteran service officers and things like that. But they're not funded to help with homelessness, job employment, substance abuse. The list went on. It was really sad. Mental health issues. It was really disturbing to me, the number of things he said we don't have funding for. So I tried to find ways that we could help with funding. And one of the primary things that I found in my research was something called the Veterans Trust Fund, which is a grant program that we have in Pennsylvania that county veterans offices and veteran service organizations can apply to get grant money to then distribute to veterans in the state. And any veteran with a DD 214 that lives in Pennsylvania or is from Pennsylvania and came back here can utilize these different places. Now, you go here to apply for benefits, to find out what other things you qualify for, if you need help. I mean, they do tons of different work. And so in 2019, I had a bill get signed into law through the budget process, and that took a lot of negotiating and work to get that done, that allowed people, regular Pennsylvanians, to make donations into the Veterans Trust Fund through your state tax refund. So when you're doing your state taxes, one of the options that you'll see now is an option to donate into that, which is great and provides direct funding. Then I wrote another bill that would have increased when you renew your license. Anyone who interacts with the PennDOT, we'll see there's sometimes options to make donations. And one of them was the Veterans Trust Fund. And there's also other organizations on there. There's Keystone Fund, there's now Breast Cancer Coalition, organ donations. There's a few different options. And I noticed that some of them were set at donating $5 or $10 if you were doing it biannually. But veterans were only set at $3 or $6. And to me, that felt like a small discrepancy that could have a big impact if we fixed it. And so I wrote this legislation in 2019, got it passed out of the House unanimously, and went to the Senate, where unfortunately it did not receive consideration. So come this new session, we started in 2021, I wrote it again, I introduced it, and this time a Republican member in the Senate liked the idea and said he would introduce that version in the Senate, which is great. Two identical pieces of legislation. And his version, we were able to get over the finish line, and the governor signed into law in June of this year.
Great. Congratulations.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's a big accomplishment. Yeah. But I don't care that my name wasn't on it. It was the senators on it. But still, it was legislation I wrote that we worked on together and could increase. The numbers were pretty high. If they had this in place, they would have added another $1.5 million in fiscal year 2018, which is the last time they had data. Mm-hmm. So this could end up being a big impact with a really small change. Yeah. And so I was really excited about it. I hope when people are renewing their license, they consider donating to the Veterans Trust Fund. It's now something my husband and I do, and we make sure our friends and family do it as well. But all of that revenue will go directly into that grant program and provide direct relief. So while we still have a long way to go, we're nowhere near done in making changes and trying to support the DMVA or veterans in our state. These are really small things that we could change that could have a big impact. And that's what you have to find as a lawmaker, in my opinion. How can you make a change that will have a direct impact? So I was really happy to see that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of the work that you do has to do with mental health. You put a big emphasis on mental health. Mm-hmm. And I know you're a part of the statewide suicide prevention task force. Mm-hmm. So can you tell us a little bit about your work on that task force?
Yeah, so what we're trying to do is really understand why suicide rates are continuing to rise. And they're rising among different people, different demographics. We know that suicide is one of the top 5 causes of death for children aged 10 to 24. We know that it's more prevalent among men in rural areas. And we also know that it's continued to rise since the early 2000s. So we are trying to study why this is happening and come up with some policy reforms that we can put into place that would see a decline. And I mean, even among veterans and first responders. So some of the things that we have worked on is creating more crisis response in conjunction with the federal government. There's soon going to be a new number that you can dial instead of 911, which we know we call for medical emergencies. We're establishing a 988 hotline that the federal government passed and the state is now implementing that you'll be able to call if you're having a mental health crisis. We have created resources for peer-to-peer support among first responders. So if something happens in your fire company or in your police department, instead of isolating, you can reach out to people who understand what you're going through. And we're not done. We still have more work to do. But I have been really proud of that work because mental health is impacting everyone. And I think a part of it is also changing the stigma that surrounds mental health. And we're seeing in the Olympics right now with Simone Biles and the huge conversation that she has managed to start about accepting that it's okay to not be okay and it's okay to ask for help or to take a step back. So I've been really focused on just having that conversation. And September is coming up. September is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. And so in 2019, we had to pause. Actually, in 2020, we just did it virtually. We started having mental health expos or mental health open houses. And in 2019, we had all these different professionals in my office, and I did a robocall through my district, and I had so many more people than I expected show up to ask for help. Some in active crisis who needed help right then and there. Wow. So in 2020, we knew with the pandemic and people being at home, mental health would be even more important. Yeah. So we did it virtually because we couldn't meet in person. But tears were shed that night. I'll never forget the conversations that we had. And I still keep in touch with some of the constituents that came on. And I'm not providing the advice. I get professionals on providing the advice. So in September, we're hosting another one in Marple at the Marple Township Library on the bottom floor. We're having an open house. We're inviting tons of different vendors to be there, which are professionals who provide help. And we're making sure to have a smaller space available in case anyone needs help right then and there. So they can go in private and meet with whichever professional is there. And I think it's really important that we continue to focus on this because mental health it's just as important as physical health. And until people start to accept that, we're going to see it permeate in all different ways. So it's been really important to me to be an active member of the Suicide Prevention Task Force. I actually kind of forced my way onto that. And I'm also in the Mental Health Caucus, which we can talk about a little bit more. And a lot of the work I do, like in September, I'm running a resolution that urges state agencies to use more sensitive language when it comes to talking about suicide. Because our jargon tends to be that someone committed suicide. But people commit crimes. And when you use the word commit, you're automatically bringing a negative connotation. As someone who had a very close family member die by suicide, I can tell you that as soon as you say that, you're a gossip piece, or people want to ask you really uncomfortable questions about the situation. Now we encourage people to say that someone died by suicide, because if someone died, and that's the way we talk, someone died of cancer, someone died of a car accident, we feel sympathy and we feel empathy and we want to be there in a different way. And so I'm running a resolution that urges state agencies to do that. I did that first in 2019 and it was passed. And now I'm really excited to see whenever we pass bills that have to do with suicide, that language is incorporated, whether it's in the original draft or it gets amended in. People are recognizing that language changes, while small, are also impactful. So we're hoping to run that bill or that resolution again this September.
That's awesome. So this is very important stuff, but just to circle back to the Mental Health Expo that's going to be happening in September, can you tell us, if people choose to go to this event, what can they expect?
Oh, sure. So it's also already scheduled. It's September 9th.
Okay.
It starts at 6:30 and goes until 8. And we're going to have different organizations. We invited the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. We invite Child Guidance Resource Center, which provides mental health support for children and families. We're inviting the Office of Behavioral Health. We're inviting some other organizations that help with substance abuse. We're inviting a veterans group that focuses on veterans' mental health. We're still growing our list of vendors. But it'll be a tabling event, so people will have tables with all of the resources available for free. They will have professionals there if they have questions. And we also are having that smaller space set up. So if you're a family that needs answers right then and there and doesn't want to talk about it in front of other people, you'll be able to step aside and have that support. In 2019, we had Narcan on available as well, which anyone who doesn't know, Narcan is used to distribute if someone's having an opioid overdose and can save a life immediately upon distribution. So we had the DA's office there with Narcan to do a tutorial to give it out if anyone wants it. We're going to invite Springfield Cares, which is an organization that focuses on opioid prevention and substance use prevention. So we're trying to think of all facets of mental health and get someone there who can help provide resources and answer questions. Because one of the most common things that I've heard is someone needs help, but they don't know who to call. Another organization we're going to have there is the Delaware County, I'm trying to think of the exact name, it's a crisis response team. And so if you're having an active mental health crisis, many people don't know this, but in Delaware County there's an 800 number that you can call, and there's a dispatch unit. They're based out of Elwyn, and it's social workers, crisis response professionals, and therapists. They will come out to your house and help you deal with that mental health emergency. So instead of having the police show up, which police are supposed to be there to help with crimes, they're not always equipped to deal with a mental health crisis, and sometimes their presence can make it worse unintentionally. This department, this unit, is there to be that emergency response. And we're also looking at trying to set up more things like that across the state. But we have a great team in Delaware County. One of my constituents, Tim, is actually very involved there, and he and I do a lot of different strategic work about how we can make sure more people know about him and his team. Oh, it's Delaware County Mobile Crisis Unit. That's the exact name.
Okay.
So they'll be there, and we'll have all different sorts of people there to help offer support. Because people, once they know who to call, they will call.
Absolutely.
We just need to make sure they know.
Yeah, really important stuff. That's great. So on a lighter note, I know you have many resources to offer, and you are always there to help your constituents. So we'll stop on a lighter note and tell us about some of the upcoming events that you have where people can come out and meet and speak to you.
Yes, so we have a lot of stuff planned, which is very exciting with COVID-19 still here, but manageable, and people are getting vaccinated. We're able to meet in person again. So in August, we're starting my town hall series. So we're going to have in-person town halls in all 4 of my municipalities. So in Morton, Radnor, Springfield, and Marple. We are also in the fall, I'm having town trail walks. So we're going to hit the trail in Springfield and in Radnor in Ithan Valley Park.
Okay.
And it'll be a walk and talk. So show up, we can walk together, ask me questions, just get to know one another. We're having a spotted lanternfly info session at the Willows Park Preserve in Radnor at the end of August. And we're having the Mental Health Expo. And then the last event we're having in November is our Veterans Breakfast, which has been an annual tradition in my district for the last 3 decades. And it's at the Paxton Hollow Country Club. All veterans in my district are invited. Breakfast is on me. And it starts early, so you can get out and head to the media for the Veterans Day Parade that we have in Delaware County. And this year, we're also going to try and have some veterans groups there tabling. So we have sort of an expo going on in addition to the breakfast. So if veterans need help with different benefits, we get veterans service dogs there. We get a couple other organizations to help provide resources, and so it'll be fun. And we couldn't have it last year. I had to change it, and it was a drive-through event. But this year we're back, and we're very excited.
That's fantastic.
Oh, and one more, we have a shred event. I know people love shred events. Our next shred event is scheduled in November 13th at the Broomall Fire Company. So even though it's in Marple, anyone in my district is invited. You'll get a phone call and information about it in emails. But people are definitely welcome to come take advantage. That is probably our most popular service.
Okay, yeah. Well, lots of good events. I would urge anybody watching to go out to any one of these events and meet Jenn and speak with her. She's always there to help. She's an awesome resource to have at your disposal. I want to thank you so much for being here and taking the time out.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Jenn makes herself readily available, like I said, for anybody that needs her assistance. If you have any questions or concerns, you can visit her website at repomara.com, where you will find her contact information. So until next time, thank you so much for watching.